Do you win when there is nothing to lose? And so what can one man say about the spirit of victory? In this episode, I would be sharing certain observations I've made about this concept of victory and how it is way deeper than just a dualistic resolve. The phenomenal thing about the world is that based on how many dimensions we see in it, we see dimensions to ourselves in any attribute we give the human archetype, the human movement. You know, life is too short to technically consider a defeat, you know. It's too rare, it's too short, it's too mysterious for language to own, really. But all we can do is use language. You know, it's as if Neo in the movie Matrix started in the Matrix. And so even a deeper question would be, what is the greatest victory? To be human is not to just know that you're a physical, existential creature. It is to wonder about why a journeying, experiential mind is here. Okay. First, do we win when there is nothing to lose? This is the ultimate question, but to consider this, we have to wonder about the definition of winning, or what is victory. And also, what sort of state is it that it's possible for there to be nothing to lose? And there's something which I'm just going to call it, you know, I think it should be standardized, but anyways, I'll speak of it in such a way, you know, in any moment of life we could bring forth the multidimensional principle. Which is another way of saying to every moment every moment has multiple angles to be looked at. Really, human analysis is it's really geometric. Let's say that there is someone. Let's examine the psychology of, let's say, how do I write this? Pretty much, let's say, the psychology of, let's say, a victorious soul and a defeated soul. And so there could technically be, trio of body, mind, and soul. Applied to this. However, for now, I'll just use the term soul as a representation of an individual moving moment. So, if we were to wonder about the psychology of the victorious soul, it's another way of saying victory is already or instantaneously confirmed. The defeated soul or here I'll say, let me see how else I can write this. Guys, this is a new concept I'm exploring. If you're a regular listener, these episodes are not just talks, they're like literally how one mind is journeying in this world. And so, there's strength in numbers. I would say the victorious soul, let's say a quality it has, is that cannot be defeated. You know what it is? I'm trying to share psychological qualities of victory and defeat. And from a physical level, on the dimension of body, it's like, okay, somebody got what they wanted. But when it comes to the dimension of the mind, the victorious soul has the option of either being in a victorious world. That means there's this saying, I think Sun Tzu says it in The Art of War, where he says those warriors in battle win who they have already won before they go into the ring or they go into the battle. Pretty much the greatness of the intellect is instantaneous demonstration, instantaneous actualization or activation. It's like a chess master who already knows where the pieces need to go and it's just waiting. Similarly, let's say there is a person who on a physical level understands there's that kind of victory. Victory on a physical level, for now evolutionary speaking, is reproduction. To continue on this genetical program that we are. Hilariously, it's like we're in a matrix that's made of ourselves, you know? So the victorious soul, we can say it's like in a victorious world. Or here, I know what's causing me to stall here. It's really because I said victorious soul. Let's say we have the concept of victory and defeat. And so, let's say we have a victorious body. This is the visible dimension. And let's say we have a victorious mind. This is a sort of invisible victory. And we have the victorious soul, which is technically the psychological authorization of an inconceivable victory. It's like another way of saying the chess master has to have faith in how the other player plays so he can play his own pieces, you know. You know, it's like various, the concept can be, you know, branched out in various ways. Maybe something I should have started off by reading for listeners. Excuse me. The dictionary Merriam-Webster defines victory as the overcoming of an enemy or antagonist, to achievement achievement of mastery or success in a struggle or endeavor against odds or difficulties. So the concept of victory is literally the counter surviving force. You know, it is literally as if we're this force in this realm, human consciousness, and so it not only receives the world, but because it is choosing to live in the world, pressures arise. And what that means is if a person physically thinks about life, it's as if, yes, even gravity is like something that one day maybe we will be victorious against, and we will have like anti-gravity rooms, you know. Who knows, right? But I'm saying it's like anything that is opposing the individual, that's when the concept of victory engages. Let's say somebody is in a peaceful garden. It's like, what victory, what defeat? They're just walking in a peaceful garden. But imagine now that person was walking in a peaceful garden, was actually a general, and when the kingdoms are at siege, that's when in some sense victory is the balancing force. The biggest issue, I would say, one finds in civilizations that are waking up to their advancement is that they haven't realized the same space of attention and energy it takes to consider that one is defeated. The same energy it takes to be victorious. So it's another way of saying to what vision is the intelligence of the human being tuned to. So this is one trio, body, mind, soul. Now, this can be applied for defeat as well. That means we could say there's like a visible defeat. We may think that's death. Let's say there's a an invisible defeat, where the invisible defeat would be as if the mind couldn't present its, infinite performance, or its greatest performance. And an inconceivable defeat would be another way of saying manifestation never had a chance. The conceivable is like a sinking ship. That would be a sort of inconceivable defeat. But the opposite of this, in regards to, like, let's say, a victorious or an inconceivable victory, this would be a way of saying everybody is in the ultimate state of being right now, and by the nature of how we're being, it's like there can be no defeat, right? To me, I noticed a lot of people who go towards spirituality, they've experienced some sort of suffering in their life. Some sort of more than usual, let's say, suffering, or something has triggered it. I'm not saying everybody's like this, but I'm saying, like, usually a lot of people who care for something beyond the world is because they have experienced turbulence in the world. When it comes to victory of the body, this is a healthy, natural human species continuum. When we think about the victory of the mind, this is the advanced potential of every DNA activating. For me, on some level, this might be a bit, I don't mean it in a rude way, but for me, I've reached a point where human beings are just potential. And in order to honor an advanced civilization, one has to honor that which is going to build it. So in some sense, an advanced reality awaits us only if we can discover the advancement within. When human beings realize that their minds are not just here to create their own world. It's as if there's a reason where we have our own personal universe behind our eyes, and we have an impersonal universe in front of our eyes. So it's very obvious, just the fact that we have mouths and ears, that the nature of the mind and intelligence is that it is to communicate itself, and that's a sort of, you could say, physical transcendence. Communication is like, a transcendental activity for a body, for an object. When I say an invisible victory, this would be as if, how would I say it? It would be as if, like, the whole species accesses the pure lands, as they speak about in Buddhism. That we attain, think of it this way, think of it right now, the most incredible technologies were made in, let's say, the health sector of the world, and suddenly everybody's lifespan had extended to a couple thousand years, right? And everybody was healthy, and it's like everybody had, like, the best case scenario of physical life, right? Everybody. Now imagine the species has covered a sort of visible, let's say, physical victory. We would go on to the mind's victory, which is pretty much that follow-up of our purpose. When we reach an inconceivable victory, this is when technically we're not a conceivable entity anymore. So the inconceivable victory is another way of saying, I guess to a religious person it would be like, the soul returning to God, but let's say to a non-religious person, it would be as if, like, everything in this world is energy powered, and its separation of our energy, us human beings being an energetic event and the universe being an energetic event, is in some sense based on our shape, right? It's as if we're a sort of, really, it's like, usually we don't speak about the human life like this, but the human body is a container. And it is containing something that for a limited time has an ability to activate. And we need to see this in regards to human beings as if, like, efficient lifetimes being lived. Really, on some level, where your attention goes will suggest what kind of being you become. our past lives, our future lives. These are just how an attention, an attributeless attention, is tunneling through attributes. We have in ancient traditions, the idea of a spirit attributed to something that moves of its own accord and is mightier than, let's say, a shaped focus. Human beings have seen spirits and everything, whether we accept the validity or not. It's like that's how the theater performance happened in history, where human beings, they saw nature and they found the spirit in nature. The natives had an incredible, metaphysical relationship with the physical world, where it was as if an animal flew by, if out of nowhere something was seen, it was as if the miracles of nature had not, they were still accessible to man's eyes. It's like when you look from the heart, you look through freedom, a context of freedom, but when you look through the mind, it's the opposite, usually. Because a shape, for a shapeless entity, is a boundary. And really what it is that this life is designed for us never to feel like we can 100% understand it. Why? Because if we did, we would turn into statues. I'm saying this poetically. That's what belief does, there's belief and faith are two completely different things. Somebody who believes in something, it's like you're being sculpted unconsciously. But somebody who has enough of an honesty to not, even if a religious person is hearing me right now, it's like we don't act like God to believe that which is man-made to be true. You see, the concept of divinity has a supremacy beyond language by the nature of the definition of the creator being inconceivable. It's as if like only the acceptance of the inconceivable, or it's literally like if we believe in God, we're acting like God. But if we know God, then that is something completely different. And when I say know God, I don't mean you know God as if like, oh my God, I talked to God last night. Like, I don't mean that kind of relationship of knowing God. I mean knowing why there is anything moving here at all. And the secret behind this, I find that it will lead to the victory of victories, the revelation of nature to itself. And there's two ways. Either you assume an ultimate world, or you assume an ultimate self. The ego is taking the path of the ultimate self. But you could say the brain is taking the path of the ultimate self, but I would say the heart is taking the path of the ultimate world. Imagine you were trapped in an island and you had experienced all the variations of your mind. You had lived in all the possible inner realm realities you could imagine. It's as if then you would reach a point where you would silently walk in the outer realms. I am telling you that this world is not only multidimensional, but all the dimensions are conscious of one another. It's as if the person starts off thinking they're just one character in a story, and then they look at the story and they see that to be a character in a world is an initial duality. And then to be able to consider the dual, we need the singular. And in order to consider the singular, we need the void. In order to consider the void, there is nothing to consider the void. All that remains is a pure awareness. And I feel all the, like yogis you see on YouTube and all those people who, in some sense, talk about enlightenment but know that it's not something that can be said. It's as if human beings that have experienced an actual unknown event of their mind will realize that the unconscious is here, and this is the purpose of the conscious mind. You can say the purpose of the human mind is equivalent to light, as if imagine, somebody's running, running in the streets with a lantern, running in the darkness of manifestation with the lantern that is our conscious mind. Once we honor the physical position, once we honor the psychological position, once we honor how all these positions are kept, and poetically, when the soul, like a general, looks at all its dimensions at once, you see, victory is a concept for that which is in the creation state. Because we're temporary, because there is something to lose, we try to overcome the challenges, right? But when I say somebody who has nothing to lose, they win, it's the strange realization that the body is in its own dimension of karma, but it's that what happens to the body's dimension of karma has to do with how the mind is held. And I don't know why it's like this. That, sometimes I think, from a theological standpoint, I'm like, oh my God, is there, unnecessary interdimensional interruption? Or is it that this world is designed to constantly change us? That means just take this in. Imagine you are a changeless being. You're an eternal view. You're this eternal force. And so imagine the world is testing you by being designed to constantly change. And so it's as if, imagine, you know what it is? Imagine technically this is similar to has parallels to, let's say ancient Vedic mystical thought. But imagine that the world was a salesman. And imagine that you think you're the customer, And the world is trying to get the customer, the salesman is trying to get the customer to agree with his context of the universe. And usually pierces through that barrier emotionally, through emotions. That means people can emotionally agree on things, and they can ideologically agree on things. Like two people who dislike each other can literally have the same belief system, but emotionally they are not in agreement. This is where the concept of a sore loser, for example, comes. Where the attitude of the sore loser is in some sense an emotional lack of contentment with the result. It's as if the person on some level has understood how the game has happened and they have been defeated, but on an inner level they don't. You know what it is? It's as if they shouldn't let really anybody to play. I don't know how to say this. The best example is like warriors back in the day. Some of them just grabbed the sword and ran in the battlefield, and there were those who were actually looking at every other warrior on the battlefield and examining their abilities. That means, imagine, people think war is just brutal savagery, but it's kind of like, instantaneous decision making, like all the time. I think war, even though as in the outer realms it was messed up, but on some level it literally is like the furnace for very unique psychological, archetypal structure to step into the future. So many events in nature have just shaped us, like it cannot be ignored. And so, when a person runs into a battlefield, they're measuring, right? They're measuring who they can fight. And so now let's look at the modern human being in 2022. And the modern human being, I would say, doesn't have physical enemies to fight, but has psychological obstacles. That means if before, the battle was the battle of bodies, now we have reached a point where it's the battle of minds. And really what suggests victory of the mind is how far it sees. That means if there was a group of people, let's say, in on the planet where it's as if, let's say, in a room, and then suddenly one of them suddenly saw the furthest and that person became a leader. Then the others saw the furthest and that person became the leader. This is honestly something that's missing in politics, right? Where the politicians, when they talk about their political system, they're talking about it just for like a couple of years. It's as if where has the eternal value system of man gone, right? It's as if like the bigger the world becomes, the greater the role of the human being. A person can have a very insignificant role in their own inner realms, but they could also have a very significant one, right? And what is the true currency of this world? That means where is people's attention going exactly? If we're a multidimensional being, if there's a probability to Rene Descartes' mind-body dualism, it would be an implication that human life should be designed, that's 50% of it is a physical attendance, and 50% of it is a non-physical attendance, but technically a journey, right? Because I have thought about, okay, what victory? Imagine right now a bunch of people competed and one of them became victorious, or let's say, what is it, like, let's say trillionaires are fighting over who builds a colony in space or something. And of course, our eyes are different, which is another way of saying our values are different. And if our values are different, then we are still in our own separate universes, right? A part of me feels that it took a while for everything to happen the way it is happening right now. And just this feeling that our human existence is actually existence, and the experience of an infinite ancient system. You know what it is? It's like they say civilization was made on a turtle's back, but I would say that turtle is called time. That's the I think, purity of that myth. That everything is built on time. It's as if it's like the planet is 4.5 billion years old. What does that mean? That means it has an intelligence, or just if it had an accumulating nature. That means if like there is a sort of gravity at work, even though truly the nature of gravity is still mysterious. What I would say, it's like victory is attention's truth restabilized. So many different types of intelligence, because we have memory. I mean, technically the human brain, it's like we're scooping up a certain, scooping up our sensory perception. Our brain is literally like a gatherer, just gathering information. And the free will, like a hunter, is kind of like striking or hunting or coordinating the attention. It's as if hunting and gathering are qualities of the brain before they're ascribed culturally or genetically. What can I say? All I can do is just, be honest in this moment and tell the viewers how far I have seen of this idea of victory. On some level, I have been not just a passenger and pilot, but I have been a viewer of my physical body since the moment I realize my mind is stretching to the whole moment, not just the body in it. The fact that there's a sort of awareness starting from the eyes, a sort of first-person point of view, just genetically, it's like we're designed not to see 360, but because the body has senses, it's as if it's like there's levels of our mind that is experiencing ourselves as a 360-degree conscious entity, right? But they are at sub-levels of the mind, I'm telling you, when a person realizes they can just be their moment, their reflexes sharpen like miraculously, It's the same in archery too, that the person who's for a second, stops all thoughts and it's just staring at the target as if the content of the mind, it's like you're coding in preferences based on where your attention goes. And imagine somebody just pays attention, completely purely at something, Physical victory, unknown. The mind's victory, I have realized that the mind is not an object, clearly. I have realized this. To the degree that objects cannot define something that is aware, like awareness is not a physical quality. It's actually an unknown quality. So when you realize your awareness, most likely what happens, I don't know, I'm not, I haven't transitioned from this life yet, but I feel it's like the unknown viewer watches how the known remembers the unknown. It's like the poetry of the lifetime being that the person was never just who they were in that lifetime. There are states of mind where a person just stops, and when they stop, it's as if strangely the world comes closer. Like, that's the bizarre thing about this world, that sometimes when you don't want something, do you know what I'm saying? It's kind of like our desires are like this interdimensional level of grasping too soon, and so a sort of innate unworthiness of the psyche being noticed. You know what it is? It's as if, I think, the way the karma of this world is happening, it's like the world is alive. And as long as we don't notice the world is alive and have a sort of direct communication with, you can say, the spirit of a victorious realm, or the ultimate archetype of the spirit of victory, a universe where no other concept other than victory existed. Can you imagine? Imagine the legend of a dimension where, I wouldn't say like even how could I say it, like a defeated person can also enter paradise, but I would say, when I say a victorious dimension, I mean a dimension that any fathomable idea which has a counter force upon it is fully capable of, in some sense. What it is like we're being pushed and pulled, and so that restabilization is like the strength of the presence of truth. There is something in Sufi culture where they talk about it, in Sufi mysticism. And some people talk about it, there's different schools of thought, but the one I have heard is very interesting, that they considered there were 4 states to liberation, or what they would call the attainment of the pearl. So to them, they saw this world as an oyster, and then the pearl was the ultimate reality, or the truth of it. And so in that culture, when a dervish walked by, people in the marketplace would be like, okay, that guy has the pearl. That being has noticed something about being itself. Divinity be beyond wrong and right? The body's acceptance, I find that to be a sort of victory. The mind's trust, I would say. That means if a person had to become content with a physically changing world, it's as if when it comes to the mind, that sort of contentment translates as the mind has to trust the world it is being moved in, and it is moving. Or let me say it this way, the body has to trust the world moving in, right? And the mind has to trust itself moving in. And we see this in people in different levels. Sometimes when how people, let's say, go to a restaurant and they each, like if there was some, let's say, hologram scanner, it would show every person's like hunger level. Like this person's hunger level is level 2,730. So imagine just like people have a different appetite for food. Sometimes when I look at human psychology, I wonder, okay, what this human being, where is its appetite for existing in manifestation arising from? And so something bizarre I noticed is that when there is ignorance, there is boldness. You know what I'm saying? That means it's like it's like all that you can do with knowledge to some degree is to use it as a hammer to constantly sharpen the intellect. Do you know? Because it's being grazed by, in some sense, all the karma that's coming up. To me, oh yeah, I forgot I was, here, I'll bridge into it. There's some moments in life where a person has to wonder, even if they're a character in the world, and what kind of world they're being a character in. In Sufi mysticism, they had 4 states, and the first state was called the Rend. And in English it would translate as the gamer, the one who had understood all psychological behaviors are games to some degree. And a game, you can say, is not per se being played just to be right or wrong. It's usually the fun factor which really gives the person, that makes the person's energetic expression worthwhile, right? To be honest, when something becomes important, people become instantaneously energetic. Like in an emergency, the laziest people are like running like Olympians, you know. You know, so it's as if when something becomes important, somehow this energetic being we are, it orchestrates its energy towards that. There's this French philosopher called Michel Foucault, and I remember he was seeing something from him where he was talking about, what I mean is that like there was something he had written in this book called The Order of Things, and that's very, I shouldn't say complex book, but it's a very unique book. But I haven't read it completely, but I found this one idea in it, and this one idea that kind of jumped out of the page to me was this notion where Michel Foucault was saying that there has to be a sort of resemblance between the first memory and the second memory, and in some sense there has to be a sort of familiarity. And if I was to simplify it, like, I don't remember his exact words, but the way I understood it is that he was pretty much saying we're tunneling through ourselves. We're not just simulating ourselves, we're tunneling through it. And so when we tunnel through it, it's as if we in some sense, it's as if you, let's say yesterday you had manifested as a self and you woke up today being a new self, yes, but yet the familiarity of yesterday is with you now. So pretty much he was saying when it comes to human psychology, there's a huge familiarity factor. Now the issue of the human mind is that in some sense it's like, all right, what's familiar? What do I know? And it's using knowledge as sort of firewood, you know, or using knowledge as fuel, you know, in the discovery of, let's say, the mystery of the unknown. But what it's going to realize is that unless the knowledge can see something beyond itself, it cannot. It's another way of saying if the potential doesn't exist within, the potential doesn't exist outside. If somebody, let's bring it to this idea of the inner realms and outer realms, which I often use. And I'll bring this back to the Sufi 4 stages. You know, pretty much Rend is the first stage. The second stage is, I forget the term, but it's pretty much the ego breaker. The third state is the crazy one. And the fourth state is a sort of, you could say, it literally means ecstasy. Or in Farsi, it would be Rendan and Mast. It would be those beings that are not intoxicated chemically, but they're intoxicated by the nature of being itself. Right? It's another Sajjid Ananda of an Eastern tradition. You know, because the future remains unknown, who knows, who will be victorious or not. On some level, if genetical patterns continuing towards an infinite future, technically it would be as if, like, the spirit of manifestation has animated as its own victory how many times. It's as if, imagine somebody who achieves victory, and the moment they achieve their first victory, they remember all the victories of all the fathomable possible manifestations and lifetimes. That means, imagine you just lived in one pure moment, and suddenly that pure moment fractalized in your psyche. In Zen Buddhism, there's something hilarious where the disciple sits down and the Zen master has this teaching where he says, kill the Buddha. He doesn't mean like physically, he means like, so the disciple would sit down and meditate, and then suddenly the disciple would be like, no way, I was Buddha in my past life. And he'd come and say to this to the Zen master, and the Zen master would be like, buddy, get in line. It's like 10 other people have also felt different Buddha in their past life. Kill the Buddha, and it was technically another way of saying go beyond the idea of your archetypal saving. Because what is freedom but it's knowing? Freedom is something that you can't have, you can know. That's it. If you don't know it, then what freedom? I feel on some level, every person's life, this might be a bit of a bold claim, but if we treat it like antennas, to me I feel multiple dimensions and forces are moving every single individual. And so imagine the brain having roots, geometrical roots like a tree, and these geometrical roots from like the top of the person's head, let's say from the crown chakra, just poetically, as poetically as possible, geometrically extending into the rest of the universe. To me, there has been moments where I have thought victory has just been the satisfaction of my temporary self. There has been moments where I've thought victory would be like pretty much how the future, achieves its destiny. And it's like from this roller coaster of selfishness, I suddenly realized what self is dancing here. And it's not an object or a subject, so what sort of victory will remain? That means if one wanted the victory of all victories, it would be as if it would be literally the transition of being a victorious self in a defeated world only when the world becomes victorious. That means it's like if the world was a ship, like a boat, and let's say millions of people, so many people board are like, I'm pretty smart. Imagine the most smart and powerful people on this boat called humanity. But if the boat is sinking, everybody's stupid. If the boat sinks, everybody's stupid. That means the intelligence of human beings cannot be measured until there is extinction. We don't know our potentials. We don't know the contributions of our energy. On some level, being a human being is another way of saying, like, it's another way of pretty much like watching energy come and go. In deep sleep, like, we are an energetic being, but we're not conscious of it. It's like somebody wondering, hey, wait a minute, it's like, am I depressed in deep sleep? Am I happy in deep sleep? Am I, it's like, is there anyone to worship a God, or is there anyone to, in some sense, doubt a truth? Honestly, for me, it has come to a point where I am like, all the known variables are very obvious. That means when I look at existence, I notice it's existing. But when I wonder about how am I noticing this existence, I realize that, okay, I'm experiencing it. Then I ask myself, who is experiencing my own existence? And then I realize the moment I can have the concept of the mind, it's as if from a higher plateau, the true inner viewer watches the content of the inner realms and the outer realms. They're overlaid. That means right now as I'm speaking, I'm a physical existential creature, but overlaid upon this physical existential creature, like this let's say evolutionary animal making noise, sophisticated math noises, like on an existential level, that's what's happening, but on simultaneously overlaid on this physical scenario is an invisible scenario, where in that invisibility it's as if free will has already discovered the cloak of invisibility. Free will is already wearing the cloak of invisibility. I think it's one of the most bizarre thoughts that a person reaches a point where they're like, wait a minute, imagine all individual selves in the cosmos, not just on Earth, were victorious. Imagine all collective fields of intelligence currently active and projecting universes. Imagine all of them were victorious. All collective fields of being were victorious. Now imagine all worlds. That means all the masterpieces of selves and worlds, intertwined. It's as if you reach a point where the person thinks they're a student of truth, and they realize, what is this nonsense of me being a truth seeker when I have never wondered if the truth wasn't there in the first place? On some level, we trust life. On another level, when we doubt it, we experience our lifelessness. There has been moments where I will tell you, this is probably like one of my, at least in this moment in time, I see it as one of my shortcomings, right? But it's as if sometimes my attention moves from topics at such a fast pace that my attention gets bored from where it is. Imagine like somebody who's like very fast runner, but you put this fast runner in like a room, and the runner's like, man, I could run so much faster than I can run in the space of this room. I am telling you, the moment human beings realize that the most honest position is to acknowledge that we don't know how we know, that's this pure starting point of any sort of spirituality. For me, on some level, because I'm still giving these talks, a part of me is like, okay, universe, you better have some plans. Like, what is this? It's like, the man who trusted his intuition, realized, he's also waiting for his intuition. It's like they asked the person, are you spiritual? And the person's like, I'm pretty sure I am. I have thought about this notion of victory, and because there's an existential dimension and an experiential dimension, I guess this is the best way to draw it out. So I'll go back to So Pretty much I would say this: we have the human being, and the human being divides between an experiential entity and an existential entity. So this is the most basic way. I mean, I don't have children, but if I did, I'd be like, all right, kids, like this is it. You know, life appears as a psychological event and a physiological event simultaneously, and free will is its navigation. Just like an airplane needs two wings for the pilot to fly it, similarly, it's as if chaos and order, the duality of our realm, is provided so that there can be an attention that pilots through. That means when karma was seen by the ancients as, you know, a disaster, samsara was seen as a disaster, for modernity it would be seen as a strange advantage. Anything is valueless until you find a way to use it. You know, this is the nature of reality. And imagine if people didn't have, let's say, a sort of ethnocentrically fueled egotism to them. It would be as if a world where, if there was no emotions on how an action happened, but it still happened. You know, it's as if like an individual victory can be owned, but a collective victory cannot be owned. So anyways, we have an experiential dimension, we have an existential dimension. Now, what can happen? We can experientially be victorious, or there could be experiential defeat. These are the two basic states. Existentially the same, an existential victory and an existential defeat. Now, if we were to say, okay, what would a existential defeat be like? It's weird, this one's kind of simple. It would be, for example, death. If we think about what would be an existential victory, it would be the immortal, natural continuity of the species. Pretty much that's it. Our best case scenario existentially is that we become advanced users of this world. And when I say advanced users, it doesn't mean we don't want to, like, I don't mean it as a sort of control, you know, I mean it in the sense of before the lifetime ends, what can we do with it? So victory on an existential level, I would say, to me, this is an advanced civilization ultimately. That means these talks are, because they exist on the level of my mind, I don't need to share them for the mind, it's just for the outer realms. You know, it's as if I'm on a sort of, if Rene Descartes' mind-body dualism holds true, it's as if like none of these talks actually require to be shared. It's like they're only shared because it's like, I think in the outer realms they can contribute, right? But in the inner realms, it's as if it doesn't matter if I vocalize something from my inner realms or if I don't. Why? Because the inner realms passes by. So it's as if like every day where I turn on the microphone, it's as if like I'm experiencing how the consciousness awoke to the world again. When it comes to an experiential defeat, this would be in some sense the concept of an ending or a loop. These two are, for now, let's say, the two views of an experiential defeat. Why? Because experience has the quality of a journey. If we went about an experiential victory, it would be another way of saying realizing the true nature of our experience, or how we're being an experiencer. the geometry of it can, like, I can play around with the geometry of this idea, guys. Pretty much I'm saying it's like I can bring in a completely different conceptual duality. So it's as if, okay, right now as I'm speaking, a part of me is existing and a part of me is experiencing. When I think about existence, the periodic table is being itself. There's no lies there, right? So existence is serving its purpose by just existing. It's just being here. Like, that's the purpose of existence, to be here, right? But when it comes to the purpose of experience, it comes to what do we do with here? That means all those people in the New Age community, they're like, all right, enlightened yogis, we have come to, all right, enlightened New Age teachers, you know, we have come to the here and now what? You know, and the enlightened teachers say, okay, there's nothing more than this, kiddo. You know, I was watching an Eckhart Tolle video, I'm like, oh my god, Eckhart Tolle has, like, you know, I was listening to him speaking, and the way he was speaking, it's kind of like you just, it's as if he's speaking, like his voice is trance-like. It's as if his voice is, like, induces a trance state, you know? It's like the calmness of Eckhart Tolle's mind exudes out of him through his voice. Like his clarity, it just emanates out of his voice. For me, I find myself kind of just like, you know, a maverick painter. You know. You know, I could be considered as a mad designer, but the mad would only be attributed to how I'm mad at Civilization 1.0. I don't know, for me, my mind, geometry has been one of my teachers. In my inner realms, I've seen the movement of so many different geometrical shapes at speeds that in some sense in the outer realms, it's like to create something of that would be impossible. I have had moments where in my inner realms, I have geometrically, like let's say I'm walking down a street, from my attention, from my eyes, overlaid as if my inner realms is overlaid on my outer realms. In my inner realms, I geometrically extend myself to the end of a street, and my brain is tasked with fathoming what that would look like, you know. And then suddenly, like when a person actually experiences certain, just for the sake of this talk, let's say advanced states of mind. These advanced states of mind are moments where, because the unknown is being revealed to the known and the memory cannot have a sort of familiar filter over what's happening in the moment, the person's true nature is actually being revealed in how they approach the unknown. When I wonder about my body, when I wonder about 8 billion human bodies on a rock in the middle of nowhere, I just see that the purpose of the body really, on some level, the victory of the body is to create. We create human beings, we create everything else the human being uses, you know. The purpose of, even though the purpose of existence on some level is to just be itself, just be existence before any idea, but I'm saying at the same time our physical life is an opportunity to just build. Like that's what people are doing. You know, it's as if it's like an effort from within is in some sense allowing the outer realms to rebuild. You know, the idea is like every philosopher, every human being pretty much needs to be asked. It's like, let's say you had attained your most advanced individual victory. Let's say right now these 8 billion human beings on the planet were like 8 billion enlightened beings, the most advanced beings known in the universe. It's like, all that would be left is for advancement to see its collective effort. We have reached a point where human beings are noticing that in the games of language, life feels shorter than it's as if when there's a hidden potential and it's not actualized, the whole species has to figure out why. They say we are alive once, but it's hilarious that we're also alive once to our own self. Like if there was a Buddhist listening to me and you considered reincarnation, you should be using this lifetime as sort of kind of like research. You know? We are, in actuality, the minds of 8 billion creatures. We're all researchers of the human mystery. And there will come a time where the educational system will see that the way it's been approaching is that it has been focusing human beings pretty much having the same ideologies, but the purpose of the human being is to be something new. Like the concept of the new is one of the most liberating things, you know. The mind seeks a new experience. And the body's purpose becomes unquestionable. You know, I think about it that if we want the victory of ourselves, like if right now I just want the victory of myself, like that would be a completely different karma than if I want, for example, the victory of the species. You know, or let's say there's somebody who they want their own victory, they want the victory of their kids, they want the victory of their grandkids, and then there's some people who want the victory of their great to the power of infinity grandkids. That means it's as if what sort of momentum can our life add to this, you know, world that's walking in the void. We are journeyers in a giant question mark. The unknown is actually an honorable state. What we think, you know, when somebody doesn't know something, what a fool. We don't realize how much the species doesn't know, because if we were to judge knowledge based on all that we know, it's like we're a tiny percentage of this cosmos. It's like, how can we find a ruler big enough to measure the sky? An endless sky. Like, how do you measure an endless sky? All you have is the starting point. For me, I'm thinking of it through levels, and I'm like, okay, I'm this human being that's alive, and so what do I have access to? I have access to my individual life. I have access towards a collective life. You know, the internet is kind of like, you know, accelerating the nature of the human mind. And what it is like we just need a global refascination towards life. That's it. Imagine like everybody could forget everything that happened yesterday to try to build something new tomorrow. Like that would be an undefeatable perception. It's like the difference between a young soul poetically and an old soul. The young soul is trying to get free from its past. The old soul is trying to become free from the future. And the only way you become free from the future is that you experience it. sometimes I think like if a moment comes where I have to transition out of this realm, I would most likely render all implications of meaning on a geometrical level and just witness what life is doing, whether I'm here or not. That is the privilege of being a conscious entity. It's like our essence is in the universe. And so, I don't know, maybe people can comment in the chat section, but there's been moments where if a person, imagine, doesn't have the concept of defeat, imagine the concept never existed, you woke up one day, you're like, these words, failure, defeat, impossible, it's like they're empty, it's like, what could they mean? They've just become sounds. It's like, what sort of ability would you have? Imagine somebody who's walking in a world trying to be victorious, and imagine somebody who's walking already in a victorious world. One is like the effortless Tao, the other, the bewildered ego. It's an effort. All of life comes down to poetically how the soul of the moment moves itself. So systematically, we cave ourselves on language. This is why I think poets are, next level. I think, to me, I'm actually grateful for any human being who's had a sense of humor or has had some sort of poetic dimension to their mind. Why? Because they were not afraid of stretching the world beyond its dimension. There's a quote from Hafez, this Sufi mystic poet from 700 years ago. If I find it, it's like this next level quote. There we go. The poet Hafez says, the great religions are the ships, poets the lifeboats. Every sane person I know has jumped overboard. It's another way of saying life is beyond the dimensions that the past solidifies it in. So really what it is that if we can appreciate, or if the human brain has had an ability to appreciate a physical self in a physical world, it is now time for it to realize it can also simultaneously appreciate an unknown self and in an unknown world. I think this is the grand task that is bestowed to human beings compared to all the other species on this planet. Because we notice how vast the world is, our minds are an extended reality. That extended reality, because it is extended beyond the outer reality, it's pretty much like our inner realms are bigger than our outer realms, so our free will can move the outer realms. It's pretty much like your mind is bigger than your body. But if your mind is, let's say, smaller than your body, then your body is at the instinctual level. So technically when you look at, let's say, lesser species like, birds and squirrels, it's as if their mind, if you could see the mind is like an energetic orb around the creature, it would be as if like their mind is still inside their body. Right, but the human being's mind is kind of like this orb became bigger than our physical body and we're in it. And so when we notice the edge of the world, the edge of this orb, it's another way of saying the invisible mind wonders about, the inconceivable being. But inside the orb, it's how you could say a visible body, has a relationship with the invisible mind. It's pretty much, imagine there's an orb, there's something in the orb, and then there's something outside of the orb. So what's in the orb has a relationship with inside the orb. I would say right now we are having a relationship with what's inside manifestation. This world, to me, in certain religious books, it says like when the day of judgment comes, or the apocalypse comes, it's like the sky starts to crack, right? As if it's like, it's as if it's fake. And so what was the truth, And I think it's what's within us. The potential of life is divinity's authorization to enter the realm. Moments are weaved with the strings of time and space, but beyond them, beyond the eyes of a human ideal, what grand victory awaits, what victory of intelligence, not just victory of the shape of intelligence, but it's as if imagine there was imagine the least advanced being, and suddenly the least advanced being became the most advanced being. And when the most advanced being arose, it's as if the only way it became because it had the contrast. An advanced being is already living in an advanced state of being, in an advanced world. So if there was an advanced being, they would not even have the concept of advancement, because the advancement is so instantaneously done. It's like the person's like, are you enlightened? And the person's like, instantaneously all the time. But if you ask me when I'm running to work, no. When I'm chasing something, it's like you can be enlightened. We're slaves to what we're desiring. But in some sense, when the person realizes, man, I can have infinite desires in this world. What do I do with this appetite for infinite desires, It's like I'm hungry for infinite simulations of reality. Eventually, the immortal viewer, or immortal being, or let's say the immortal entity, or the invisible viewer will realize that the moment it acknowledges what it is, it can acknowledge more. So it's as if when we acknowledge our limitations, we're like, no way, now we can look at the limitless. It's like the attention is free. It's as if we free our attention from how a self is possessing a world and how a world is possessing a self. And it's as if it's like the bird for a second that's been, sitting on a branch its whole life for a second, it stops a flap, like let's say moving its wings, and then focuses and then begins to move its wings simultaneously, as if unless the bird discovers symmetry, it doesn't discover flight. Like symmetrical mobility. And who knows, maybe the most advanced state of human speech is when the person's hands, like left hand and right hand, are perfectly like symmetrical. Sometimes you can tell, When we become observers of our own life, we give our attention a chance to become acquainted with it. For me, the concept of victory has been moments of like strategic, like kind of like, imagine you were somebody who had, learned like Wing Chun, and Wing Chun was inspired, it's a fighting style inspired out of pretty much a crane and a snake fighting, right? And the crane wins ultimately. But the idea of it is that both creatures have really fast reflexes of instantaneous movement, right? And there has been moments in my life where I felt I've had like an instantaneous, just like let's say a lion just, claws at something or instantly like roars. It's like there's been moments where I've instantaneously known the moment before the ideological, let's say, inner interface of it arrived. Okay, so there's some really intense questions in the chat section. I don't know if they're being said humorously or seriously. Please let me know and I will respond to the questions. You see, our brain, so, okay, I'll read the question, because, questions are kind of like, rare visitors to the chat section also. So, a person in the chat section says, is there a perfect state to reach that will allow others to accept me, to accept the dragon on my back that I pray I don't mutate into? I don't want to be a monster, I'm already chained to the in-between. Okay, so these are like, it's as if, it seems like dimensions are interfering. So the idea would be that first wonder about the perfect state, then wonder about what others mean, then wonder about what the idea of a dragon on your back means, then wonder about the fear of what you're going to change into being, right? And then realize emotions sometimes are expressions in the moment, but it's an instantaneous knowing that will make you confident to know that there's an answer to this. So it's as if you will stare at a question endlessly, like a Rubik's Cube. The person's like, how many times do I have to move this? Right? But eventually you will suddenly unlock the question and realize where the question is coming from. There's some people who, when they hear questions, they just think about the question. And then when somebody hears a question, they realize questions are being asked. So who has asked the question? Who has created the design of the problem for it to be solved? So it's as if when you go to the origin of the design of the expression of your mind, you come to its reality. And first, that's through time, unless you have realized your presence. And it's super simple. Like right now, my name is Amin. I'm using this online name, Mr.Within, right? And, kind of like, I don't know, Batman of like the wisdom world. Batman of like, the New Age community. But I'm saying these are all archetypes, and I know that I cannot be ideas that come and go. I can claim myself to be anything. I know that the state of my mind changes. So rather than seeking an ideological belief, I have had a realization of how it's a moving system. It's like, how can you fear a changing world? It's like you're fearing something that is changing. It's like, how can we fear change? It's like, what are we even fearing, Ultimately, I don't know. I think I'm still in the process of learning deeper levels of it, but I have realized the intellect is an advanced instrument, but it depends who's using it. Everything in life, it's a force. These forces, we can have instantaneous contentment, or we can have, let's say, ideological disharmony. There's this idea where they say, like, what's like one of the most profound philosophical questions, the question why, W-H-Y question. Technically, the unknown cannot have a purpose. we can say purpose is a creature's doing. But when we have this appreciation for the concept that nature on another level means the disposition, it's as if right now I'm, sitting in on a chair in my balcony, and it's a physical existence. It's kind of like my attention is seated in an existence. What is victory for a living being? It is to love all that there was to love. It's like we are truly multidimensional beings, and the true efficiency, it's like human beings are a Rubik's Cube, and it's like the Rubik's Cube hasn't been solved yet, but we can expect that the future generations honestly, guys, I've reached the end of this episode. I guess, when there's nothing to lose, there's no defeat. And I think this is true, on some level. If a person has too much of an expectation on something, obviously the inner realms are playing around with the perfection that, in the outer realms, maybe it's conditional. A person in their minds, they can envision themselves flying, but when they jump in the air, they come back to the ground. Technically, when a person jumps, they can fly for a nanosecond. On some level, when there's nothing to lose, only victory is left. And even if somebody has lost something, victory is left. What else happens when there's defeat? It's like we stare as the void. We stare into the void as the void until the singular meaning arises. The singular stares at the void, and it's how it's being all of it, and so duality arises. The dual stares at all, both the void and the singular void, and then infinity arises. And then infinity returns to the void. So it's as if the greatest stories of conceivable manifestation, it's as if, just like stories come from silence and they return to silence, from an unknown, still intelligent state, realities, known dimensions will return to an unknown. So the idea of life seems to me, because its physical ending is kind of like, maybe like there's, no more body, and we don't know if attention continues or not. But let's say if attention continues, it would be in an unknown state. So if it's going to be in an unknown state, it might as well get acquainted with it now. And I think the presence, the simple presence of the unknown, acknowledgement of the unknown, that is literally where faith begins. It's as if the person said, I have faith in God, and then somebody said, wait a minute, you have faith in an inconceivable And that's the point, because that's all that can happen with the inconceivable. Pretty much, let's say a physical being can have like purposes in the realm, a mental being can have purposes, but when it comes to the inconceivable dimension, it's like all you can do with the unknown is to trust it, and it activates. But if you distrust it, it doesn't activate. And if a person distrusts moments in their life where there's, let's say, the unknown, like let's say it this way, that every moment, let's say a balanced person has 50% known variables, 50% unknown. That means they can't get pulled by either side of duality. It's another way of saying they can't be evil or good, right? And it's not that they have to be good or they have to be evil. Like all of that is, how attention moves. I'm just saying on some level, when you notice your presence, you're noticing how the moment is being before you're moving in it, right? The human life is here to discover its unknown life. There's a beauty to that. I mean, that's why our brains are way more evolved than other species. It's like we're getting to see more, and we're like, okay, what do we do when we see more? So I'm gonna go into a quote tunnel, guys. Quotes on victory. I'm gonna read some really victorious quotes right now. People are gonna be probably they've never heard, victorious quotes like this. John F. Kennedy: victory has 1,000 feathers, but defeat is an orphan. Nelson Mandela: it is better to lead from behind than to put others in front, especially when you celebrate victory when nice things occur. You take the front line when there is danger, then people will appreciate your leadership. Yeah, that means it's like when something important is happening in the moment, it's like how are the souls present in the world are moving in accordance to that. Sun Tzu says invincibility lies in the defense, the possibility of victory in the attack. George S. Patton says, accept the challenges so that you can feel the exhilaration of victory. Buddha says it is better to conquer yourself than to win 1,000 battles. Then the victory is yours. It cannot be taken from you, not by angels or by demons, heaven or hell. Bear Bryant says, if you believe in yourself and have dedication and pride and never quit, you'll be a winner. The price of victory is high, but so are the rewards. Mahatma Gandhi says satisfaction lies in the effort, not in the attainment. Full effort is full victory. Aristotle says, I count him braver who overcomes his desires than him who conquers his enemies, for the hardest victory is over the self. Adlai Stevenson 1 says, on the plains of hesitation lie the blackened bones of countless millions who at the dawn of victory lay down to rest and in resting die. Okay, that's some chaotic history right there. Joseph Joubert says the aim of argument or of discussion should not be victory but progress. Napoleon Hill says victory is always possible for the person who refuses to stop fighting. Miguel de Cervantes says to be prepared is half the victory. Napoleon Bonaparte: victory belongs to the most persevering. That's like a proper conqueror quote right there. Douglas MacArthur: build me a son, O Lord, who will be strong enough to know when he is weak and brave enough to face himself when he is afraid, one who will be proud and unbending in honest defeat and humble and gentle in victory. Winston Churchill: victory at all costs, victory in spite of all terror, victory however long and hard the road may be, for without victory there is no surviving. Oh my god, I can't pronounce it. Publilius Sirius says, where there is unity, there is always victory. Jocko Willink says, The temptation to take the easy road is always there. It is as easy as staying in bed in the morning and sleeping in. But discipline is paramount to ultimate success and victory for any leader in any team. Harry S. Truman. In reading the lives of great men, I found that the first victory they won was over themselves. Self-discipline with all of them came first. Plato, the first and greatest victory is to conquer yourself. To be conquered by yourself is of all things most shameful and vile. So technically right now, me being a cigarette smoker, I'm being conquered by myself. You know, so there's another way of saying if Plato had seen Game of Thrones, he'd be like, shame, shame, shame. And I'd be like, chill out, Plato, you're already dead. I'm being playful here, guys. In reality, life happens, and we must have the honesty to confront it and the honesty to change it before, which is another way of saying we can select our confrontation. Bill Russell says concentration and mental toughness are the margins of victory. Bob Marley, as a man sow shall he reap, and I know that talk is cheap, but the heat of the battle is as sweet as the victory. Horace Mann, be ashamed to die until you have won some victory for humanity. Spoken like a true advanced communicator. True pilot. Anthony Hamilton, I learned patience, perseverance, and dedication. Now I really know myself, and I know my voice. It's a voice of pain and victory. Nicki Minaj, your victory is right around the corner. Never give up. I hope this is a lyric. Ferdinand Foch, the will to conquer is the first condition of victory. And you know what it is? It's like conquering. People have the destruction attitude, but when it comes to like somebody, let's say, scrubbing a pool table, like, it's like you can have a conqueror's attitude, you know. Who's this? Jordan Peterson, for example, you know, in one of his books, I saw this video where he was saying pretty much to like a room full of, you know, adults wearing suits, like, clean your room. And so really, I'm saying you can have a conqueror's attitude to cleaning your room, right? It doesn't mean being a conqueror is good, right or wrong. You know, the consequence could be right or wrong, but the attitude is just an attitude, unless, you know. Pretty much the idea is we should have a consideration that when we wake up in the morning, the world is really one of the most advanced, accessible states. Like the world is here. There's an incredible might to that there's something here. Something's moving here too. In regards to the mystery of consciousness and beyond. Joyce Mayer, no matter what has happened to you in the past or what is going on in your life right now, it has no power to keep you from having an amazingly good future if you will walk by faith in God. God loves you. He wants you to live with victory over sin so you can possess His promises for your life today. Okay, so this is a religious theologist quote. But yeah, the idea is when you have faith in God, you're having faith in the inconceivable origination of movement in the realm. So if you trust the world, just like how human beings, when they trust each other, their communication, their inner realms open up. And when a person trusts the world, poetically, the inner realms of the world opens up to their inner realms, Isoroku Yamamoto, in the first 6 of 12 months of a war with... Okay, this is political. I'll move on. Alexander the Great, I do not pilfer victory. Pilfer. Oh, steal. Oh, okay, pilfer means steal, you know. Alexander the Great says, I do not pilfer victory. Volodymyr Zelensky, it's a victory when the weapons fall silent and people speak up. That's very important. Literally, communication can solve war, or disaster becomes the outcome either way. You know, it's this idea of like when, let's say, two people fight, the moment they choose to fight, they're not going to be the same as before the fight, right? It's like you can't hit someone without having the same force, the stress of the same force on your own hand. It's another way of saying violence is designed in this realm to be double-edged, so when somebody's violent, their brain or their subconscious has a sort of equal plateau of being like, you know, it's another way of saying the subconscious that is not a personified archetype still sees the pain, right? So it's like violence to others is violence to self, technically, because the memory is being created as part of the psyche. Menachem Begin. He says peace is the beauty of life, it is sunshine, it is the smile of a child, the love of a mother, the joy of a father, the togetherness of a family, it is the advancement of man, the victory of a just cause, the triumph of truth. Malcolm Forbes says victory is sweetest when you've known defeat. Yep. Blaise Pascal, it is the fight alone that pleases us, not the victory. Herodotus, some men give up their designs when they have almost reached the goal, while others, on the contrary, obtain a victory by exerting at the last moment more vigorous efforts than ever before. Sophocles says you win the victory when you yield to friends. Howard Cosell says the ultimate victory in competition is derived from the inner satisfaction of knowing that you have done your best and that you have gotten the most out of what you have to give. You have gotten the most out of what you had to give. Herbert Kaufman, failure is only postponed success as long as courage coaches ambition. The habit of persistence is the habit of victory. Miyamoto Musashi, study strategy over the years and achieve the spirit of the warrior. Today is victory over yourself of yesterday. Tomorrow is your victory over lesser men. Vinoba Bhav says if a man achieves victory over this body, who in the world can exercise power over him? He who rules himself rules over the whole world. Technically, you rule over how it's like you have the freedom of seeing the world before your mind subconsciously captures it in meaning. Because the origin of the fearlessness is that nothing can extinct. Because it's like literally there's no, imagine the concept again of defeat never existed. It's like we've only known victory. Thomas Carlyle, if there be no enemy, there's no fight. If no fight, no victory. And if no victory, there is no crown. Ken Venturi says victory is everything. You can spend the money, but you can never spend the memories. Atal Bihari Vajpayee says victory and defeat are a part of life, which are to be viewed with equanimity. Heinz Guderian says, if the tanks succeed, then victory follows. Oh my god. So much chaos. Simone de Beauvoir says if you live long enough, you'll see that every victory turns into a defeat. You know, there were these Zen masters that would say life is kind of like building a boat, and then you go midway into the ocean, you paddle midway into the ocean, and the boat sinks. But that's on one level. That's kind of like there's a shadow to light and there's a light, right? it's as if like there's this notion of a winner and loser, but then there's something, it's like who is knowing it's winning, who is knowing it's losing, and could the knower be beyond the shape, the conditions? Norman Vincent Peale. Part of the happiness of life consists not in fighting battles, but in avoiding them. A masterly retreat is in itself a victory. I think it's the idea of like just the conflict of energy, right? Every moment presents as an energetic atmosphere, right? There's like energy. There's a feeling to every moment. Marcelo says Real Madrid fans. Oh, okay, something else. Epictetus, if you seek truth, you will not seek victory by dishonorable means, and if you find truth, you will become invincible. Oswald Spengler says the secret of all victory lies in the organization of the non-obvious. Wow. I think I just read a life-changing quote. I mean, it seems to be that case with just universally with psychology. Jean-Paul Sartre says if a victory is told in detail, one can no longer distinguish it from a defeat. Robert H. Schuller says if there exists no possibility of failure, then victory is meaningless. It's another way of saying if there's no challenge, it's like what reward? But on some level, I feel if a person, let's say, gets a reward of the challenge and the reward of the challenge is beyond the challenge, then they don't look for the challenge, but their attention's open to greater challenges. It's like the ability of the species increases, and the more the ability and honesty of the species increases, and its honor increases, the more there's going to be heroic advancements in the species. Sun Tzu says if fighting is sure to result in victory, then you must fight, even though the ruler forbid it. If fighting will not result in victory, then you must not fight even at the ruler's bidding. Excuse me, to continue. Franz Kafka says one must not cheat anyone, not even the world of its victory. Incredible. Mike White says there's a victory in letting go of your experiences. Pierre Corneille says a victory without danger is a triumph without glory. George Aiken says the best policy is to declare victory and leave. Man, politics is like theater. Anyways, guys, thanks for listening. I guess when it comes to the question, do you win when there is nothing to lose? If there's nothing to lose, maybe the concept of victory cannot exist, but at the same time, maybe if the concept of victory exists, it's an all-encompassing victory. It's like the potential of life is a sort of victory ultimately. The spirit of victory. So far, I'm trying to think of the different spirits I've talked about in these episodes. I've talked about, the spirit of advancement. Now I'm talking about the spirit of victory. I'm talking about, the spirit. Endless effort through ultimate joy. A complete victory from the beginning. Thanks for listening. Much blessings and love.